the club previously in Defoe, Chimbonda and Keane. Pulled in Carlo Cudicini to boost his goalkeeping options from Chelsea. And then Wilson Palacios joined from Wigan as well for a big money signing. Tottenham at that time when Harry Redknapp had joined was sitting towards the bottom of the Premier League. These signings helped Tottenham rise to 8th, and then that, of course, put in the building blocks for the Champions League seasons that we went on to see. So some interesting January transfer windows for Tottenham. Where do you guys see this one taking them?
Yeah, when you look at what they need to give them a bit of a push under Ange and the direction that they want to go into and sign the sort of players that actually fit his philosophy. I know Timo Werner, had his problems at Chelsea in front of goal, but actually I think stylistically, with the way Ange plays, with Tottenham being all action, he likes players with mobility, he likes players who make runs, players that are quick, they play on the front foot, they want to press teams. I actually think Timo Werner can be really effective very quickly. Whether or not his chance conversion would have improved since the last time he was in the Premier League, that is for us to all wait and see. But in terms of the way he plays, I think that will help. And we've seen when Mina was on talking so glowingly about Dragusin, about the attributes that he has and the type of defender that he has, looks like going to be perfect cover for the starting centre-backs in Christian Romero and Mickey van der Ven, who's been another fantastic signing. So actually this window, I mean, it's hard to say it's going to have the impact that maybe Kulusevski and Bentancur had, or, you look at Robbie Keane, he's a Spurs player, he's fantastic, Defoe, absolutely fantastic player as well. So I'm not going to go on record to say that, but I think it can have quite an interesting impact for this Spurs side of where it is right now.
Yeah, time will tell, innit? You must have had fun pulling out some of those January windows, that 2009 window.
Yeah, it's one of those windows that always stands out for me when Harry Redknapp, we know Harry Redknapp likes to wheel and deal, but he really took it to the extreme, didn't he, in that window. Yeah. Hey, Ryan Nelson as well, I'm afraid. I'm not even sure he ever played a game, did he? But when you finish 4th, it doesn't really matter what you do in January, does it?
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about Eric Dyer. Before we do chat about him, though, let's just hear his goodbye message yesterday.
How do I even start this? Yeah. It's been an incredible journey. Obviously, when I arrived, you never imagine a situation like this, especially in football. 9.5 years in football terms is it's kind of like dog years, I made friends that I now consider some of my best friends from the early days, from the beginning, and then from now, I'm incredibly lucky to work under some of the best managers in world football. And I don't take any of those relationships or experiences for granted. An everyday habit, going to bed, waking up, wearing a Tottenham shirt, that's what it's been like for me for so long. And then obviously the fans, it's been a hell of a journey. The way I was received from the moment I came has been incredible. I hope you can experience great success with the club moving forward. I'll be watching and supporting and hoping for the same.
It was quite emotional, that, actually, wasn't
Very.
it?
Yeah. Tearjerker.
The music as well, the whole vibe. It's one of these moves where I saw someone describe it as he's fallen upwards. That's kind of how it's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, sometimes that's, a disrespectful term to maybe a player's career. They've worked incredibly hard to get to where they got to, and it might be hard for them to maybe hear that phrase attributed to them. But in terms of Eric Dyer being out of the fold at Spurs under Ange Postecoglou and sort of, in Spurs not doing too well with Jose and Conte, etc. I think if you would have said he would have ended up at Bayern Munich alongside Harry Kane, you would feel like that was, didn't see that coming. And he probably thinks the same, in your career. Moves appear, they become apparent, the opportunity arises when you didn't think, and you have to take it with two hands. And for him, as you can see in that video there, Spurs means a lot to him. He spent a big part of his most of his career, his senior career, at Spurs, and he had a big impact with that Pochettino side and the sides that came after that, which maybe didn't hit the heights. But he's been part of one of the most successful sides in the last decade for Spurs when they were playing front foot football, attacking football, and then obviously when they changed under different managers, he's gone through that sequence as well. But I think for him, it presents a really unique opportunity to go to Bayern Munich and hopefully play enough games in order to pick up some silverware, because, if you're going to put a bet down, Bayern Munich are going to win stuff, aren't they, in the next sort of 18 months? You would imagine German Cup, obviously they're going to be challenging for Champions League and certainly the Bundesliga. So a real chance for Eric Dyer in a weird way to actually get some silverware in his back pocket. So, yeah, I think a real heartfelt message for him.
Do you know what I think the biggest takeaway is from that video? And I watched that video yesterday. It's that Eric Dyer has been completely out of favour under Postecoglou. He'd probably have every right to be bitter about the way he's been treated this season. Centre-backs have been missing. He hasn't got a game, but he isn't.
It's not one of those kind of players.
But that just tells you everything about what Postecoglou is harvesting at Tottenham. It's probably been explained to Eric Dyer in football reasoning why he's not playing. Eric Dyer's probably had a very honest and frank conversation with Postecoglou, and he's come away from it. He's moving on to Bayern. He's not bitter at all. But, you know, a player usually in those circumstances would be very, very unhappy about how they've been treated, but because of what Postecoglou's doing, he's not.
He's only 29.
Just really quickly, there was a thing on social media, I don't know if you guys saw it, where the sort of Spurs in-house media were videoing the players coming in and fist pumping.
Oh, yeah.
And it's quite sad, actually, because they got Eric Dyer on, and obviously he's been out the fold for a while, and he said, don't worry, you don't have to use it, or something like that. Yeah, and it was quite sad, but it's indicative of actually just reminding me of what you're saying. He's not bitter about the situation. Doesn't seem like that sort of player, James.
I think it's an interesting position he's found himself in at Spurs. He's been there for 9.5 years, but he is only 29. He's got 49 England caps. He probably feels that he can maybe kick on if this spell goes well. Thomas Tuchel knows him really well from playing against him when he was the Chelsea manager. It just feels like an interesting move for him at this time, but it's worked out well for Spurs as well. They offload his wages. And for Eric Dyer, he's played in Portugal. He grew up in Portugal as well. So him moving abroad isn't going to be a big thing for him. Yeah. Join up with Harry Kane, they could do something special together this year.
Yeah. That's Eric Dyer leaving the club then. Obviously, they've brought a couple of signings in. We know they still ideally want a midfielder. Can you see that happening in this window?
Yeah, that would cap off the perfect window for Spurs. There were 3 priority areas in this window. A left winger, they've sorted that really with Timo Werner. Centre-back, they've got that sorted with Dragosin as well. A centre midfielder would cap the perfect window. Now, Maddison, Sarr and Basuma are currently out at the moment due to various issues, whether they're AFCON or for injury. But that is dependent on bringing in a midfielder, if they can maybe remove a midfielder. Now, Lo Celso and Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, they're the 2 players they have been interested in, but I think Lo Celso's performed really well over the last few months, so it's unlikely Spurs will want to let him go. Højbjerg is somewhere I think that they could maybe look to move on, and if they get a suitable for him and they've got a replacement assured, they'll probably bring someone in. But we have been reporting Conor Gallagher is a player that Spurs are really interested in signing. Now, he's got 18 months left on his contract. We know that there may be a willingness from Chelsea to sell him from a financial fair play point of view. It'd represent pure profit. 18 months left on his contract. I think it would still cost Spurs a lot. This could be a move that maybe over the coming weeks develops into something, perhaps.
Oh, interesting times. Right, loads on the way this morning, including details of 2 potential departures at Chelsea this month. Plus, will Manchester United now target a striker? to take a quick look at some of the stories making the back pages. Let's start then with the Daily Mirror. We've been discussing Manchester United, well, we're going to discuss Manchester United's need for a striker in just a moment, but the Mirror reporting that Erik ten Hag is keeping tabs on Ajax striker Brian Brobby as they begin to plan their summer transfer window. The Daily Telegraph, meanwhile, say Arsenal are admirers of Bologna's Joshua Zirkzee and are keeping a close eye on the striker as they consider potential targets who could strengthen Mikel Arteta's attack. And finally, the Evening Standard report that Chelsea are interested in Republic of Ireland striker Evan Ferguson, but Brighton will demand a fee in excess of £100 million to sign him. And that rounds up some of the stories making the back pages this morning. A little reminder for you as well, if you are out and about, you can keep across all the latest deals and all the latest transfer stories on our Transfer Centre blog. Just scan that QR code that you can see on your screen right now. Right then, let's talk about Manchester United now. The news about Jadon Sancho returning to Borussia Dortmund on loan announced yesterday. Well, this is what Sancho had to say about that move.
You know, Dortmund, you know, me connecting with the fans, and obviously with Edin, Sebastian, Watzke, and obviously Marco, and a few other players, so I felt like it was the right decision for me. Yeah, it's an iconic number. Obviously, growing up, 10 was always my favourite number, due to Ronaldinho, obviously me watching his YouTube clips. So, you know, when Dortmund said 10 is available, yeah, I didn't second guess. I just said, yes, please, if you could reserve it for me, that would be perfect. I think my teammates will make it easier for me. You know, me knowing a few of the guys in the dressing room, I think, you know, they'll welcome me nicely.
I want to sort of like look at, we've obviously talked about it in depth because we kind of knew this loan deal was coming, but I want to look at it because everyone's saying, oh, it's brilliant for sort of every party. So kind of break it down and you each look at whether it's United, Dortmund or Sancho himself. So Flex, just kick us off. Why is this good news for Manchester United? Because they spent a lot of money on this player.
Yeah, it's good in the short term. I think if/when Jadon Sancho leaves in the long term, that'll be dissected in a different way for the huge outlay spent on him versus what that may look like in the summer. But in terms of why is it good in the short term, it's really simple, really, because he's fallen out of sorts with Erik ten Hag, has not played since the Arsenal game, and he's been out of favour and could not get back in, and it looked like there was absolutely no way that the two can reconcile and put it behind them and find a space for him in a struggling Manchester United side. So for Jadon Sancho, he gets to go off and get his, you know, confidence up, which for Manchester United means that his stock could rise again because his stock has severely fallen. If there was a transfer fee now to be paid, it would be extremely low because he's been completely inactive and hasn't played any football. And when he comes back in the summer, there's the hope from a club perspective that he's played well. Dortmund could potentially take him on a permanent, and maybe even more suitors could come in, and then Manchester United could sort of recoup some of the big outlay that they had. So from a club perspective, it was all about getting him out playing as quickly as possible, and January was the quickest position to do that.
Yeah, what's the other club perspective then, if you're looking at Dortmund's point of view?
Yeah, Dortmund have done this kind of thing before with bringing in players that have played for the club previously, who they've moved on back to the club. It's kind of had mixed results. I think Goetze and Sahin went back to Dortmund and weren't the same players that they were before, but Hummels went back and has been a good signing for them second time round. This is going to be, I think, from Dortmund's point of view, purely a short-term move. I think if Sancho does well, then the sums, the fees that Manchester United would want, I don't think they'd be in Dortmund's wheelhouse. That Dortmund aren't a club that will go and spend 50, 60, 70 million on a player. And obviously that's what Manchester United are hoping is going to happen. They're hoping Sancho's going to go there, do well and retain the value of the money that Manchester United spent on him from Dortmund in the first place. But looking at Dortmund's league position at the moment, they fell away. I think they're around 15 points off top spot now from Leverkusen, so they fell away dramatically over the Christmas period, and they kind of just need to freshen up their front line, and they see Sancho in the short term for the second half of the season as someone who's going to offer them a decent chance of progressing in the Champions League, because they've got PSV, I think, in the last 16, and also to just try and move themselves back up the Bundesliga and to try and qualify for the Champions League, which is always their ambition as a club.
I think for the player it seems pretty obvious, doesn't it? He wants to go somewhere, get away from United, get away from all these issues that have been surrounding him and just have a bit of a fresh start, but he's going back to a club that he knows well.
Yeah, 4 years he spent there. He had so much success, 50 goals, 64 assists in that time as well. And it's a chance for him to prove a point as well. He feels he was a scapegoat at Manchester United. He's not played since September. He's not trained with the first team since September. He's not played for such a long period of time. So it's a real opportunity for him to play Champions League football, play at a club where he's had success as well. And he's had so much success with the manager, Edin Terzic, as well. He did really well when he was in interim charge there at the club. So for Jadon Sancho, we'll learn so much about him over the next few months. Has he still got the hunger? Has he got the application there? The question marks that Erik ten Hag had about him, are they valid? Well, we'll find out in the next few weeks.
Yeah, it makes a really good point there. We're going to learn a lot about him as a player.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
As a person, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly, because this is... I'm not going to say it's the first bit of adversity he's had in his career, because I think that would be unfair. I mean, obviously, look at what happened with him at City. He decided that he wanted to go and play, and he took a big step at a young age to go and move country. So actually, you look at that, and that's part of the fundamentals of the characteristics that you would think he would need to be able to mature and come back into the league at Manchester United and then flourish. Then he's sort of stagnated and taken a sort of backward step. So it is a
kind of adversity, isn't it?
Different, completely different type. Exactly. So now he's been out the fray for a while. How quickly can he get back going again? Yes, he has been doing individual training, and Man United have made sure that he's done that. So he's not completely not touched the ball. But in terms of match sharpness, match fitness, it's a completely different
He hasn't even played for the under-21s, has he?
No, he hasn't played. He hasn't played any games, so he's only been training and by himself at that. So a really, really different scenario for him, and we will learn a lot about how well he can get back to his best.
We spoke at length yesterday about Anthony Martial and the fact that he's going to be staying at the club until his contract expires. But what does this mean for United's search for a striker? And they need one.
I'll be honest. I still think it's unlikely. Especially, I think the Anthony Martial situation is probably the decider in that. I wouldn't say it's impossible for Manchester United to bring in a low-cost loan, which was always going to be the maximum they were able to do in this window. And maybe by trimming the squad, you've seen Donny van de Beek leave to go to Germany. Hannibal is looking like he's going to leave. Anthony Martial maybe would have been one that could have helped, and obviously Jadon Sancho has shaved a little bit off the wages and stuff like that. So maybe with those players having left, without Anthony Martial leaving, there could be a few coppers or a few shillings around the place to be able to scrape something together for a low-cost loan. But I think the fact that Anthony Martial, it looks like he's going to stay, I think that severely limits Manchester United being able to bring in a striker in this window. I
mean, you briefly mentioned Hannibal Mejbri there. Is that the idea behind letting him go, the fact that they want to bring some money in and get some return?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I mean, I did a little piece last week about why Manchester United have had a batch of players that they've extended a year's contract to trigger the option for a further year. And the Hannibal situation sums it up perfectly. Preserve his value. He's a player who will be out of contract in 2025, and now with potentially or agreeing a fee with Sevilla for a loan deal and an option to buy, that will bring in a sizable amount for a player who only had a year left on his deal, because at this moment they triggered the extension. And also there's a buyback option should it go through with Sevilla, which means that Manchester United are in full control of that situation should Hannibal go on to heights that maybe they didn't think he would, and he turns out to be a fantastic player. So, yeah, I think it is part of that and trying to raise money and be in a better position long-term come the summer.
Yeah, right. Coming up, loads still to come on Good Morning Transfers. Up next after the break, we're going to bring you Eddie Howe's news conference. Will Newcastle be active this window? welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. Let's just bring you some breaking news now, and it is more injury woes for Newcastle. Joe Linton will be out for at least 6 weeks with a leg injury. Head coach Eddie Howe has just been holding his news conference. Let's hear what he had to say.
He's got a problem with his tendon in his quad. Without going too detailed, it's a very difficult place to get an injury, hence the time scale that he's going to be out. So he's very disappointed. He's very, he wants to play, he wants to do well. So, we've had to do a job of trying to pick Joe up, really.
You must be fed up talking about injuries. I mean, and especially for someone like Joe Linton, who it feels like his season has kind of been stop-start throughout.
Yeah, very much so. I think that we haven't wanted to focus on their injury situation because it's really only negative. There's not much good to be had from talking about it consistently or highlighting it. Joey's injury again is another freak one, really, where he's off balance trying to switch a play, gets pushed in the back and his leg goes at an awkward angle and then ends up with an injury. But unfortunately for us, any injury we've picked up this year hasn't been a sort of 1 or 2 week injury. Everything's been 6 to 8 weeks at a time when we can't afford it. We're really stretched in the attacking areas, midfield areas, and we have been for a long time, so it's inhibited our ability to rest players and also change the flow of games by bringing players on that can make a difference. So it's been difficult.
I was just about to say to you, it feels like you're getting players back, but then I looked at the list and there was 10 missing, including Tonali and the likes of Mankiel, who's obviously been out for a while. Joe Linton, to listen, you're back to 11 again. At which point does that become a concern? And at which point does it become a need to maybe do something in this January transfer window just to cover for the amount of players you've got missing?
I think in an ideal world, given the freedom to act, we would have brought players in already. But we're not in that situation. As Darren alluded to yesterday during the interviews that he delivered, financial fair play is a problem for us, and we're having to navigate around that. So, that's the position we're in. In regard to your question, when does it become a problem? I think it's already a problem, but we're just trying to manage through it.
How frustrating is it when the club are owned by the Public Investment Fund, richest owners in the world, and it feels like the money's there, but you're not able to spend it due to the restrictions of FFP and PSR?
Yeah, I think it's a frustration for everyone connected with us, because I think we would like, well, certainly the owners are very ambitious and they would like to help and they would like to improve the squad in every opportunity they can, but the rules and the conditions we're working under don't allow that. So I don't know what to say in regards to that. That's just how it is, and we're acting in the way that we can.
I suppose the only sort of good thing in all of this for you now is that you don't have that hectic schedule where you're playing every 3 weeks. At least you're having a week between games now, and then you've got a 2 week break coming up. So it should allow the players that have been playing a lot to be a little bit more fresh. I
think that's a good point. I think when you go back to the Sunderland game, that was the first time in a while that I'd seen players look fresh, look back to themselves. And it sort of hit us, watching the game, reviewing the game and watching it live, that we were playing fatigued during that period where players didn't look themselves. But that was much more like us. Now I hope to see that again this weekend. No guarantee on result, but you'll see hopefully a much more Newcastle-like performance.
Thanks, Eddie.
Thanks, Keith.
No problem.
Andy? Morning, Eddie. Just one on the derby. Upon return to the training ground, there were quite a few fans gathered outside with flags, etc. It was some welcome back. I just wondered what that was like for you and for the players after such an important win.
Yeah, I think the whole experience really of the day was really well coordinated. So I think there was very minimal trouble that I'm aware of, which I think was really important, that people went to the game, came back safely. So I thought that was managed really well. And then, of course, the welcome that we had back at the training ground was really nice to see. And I think it's appreciation really of the players' efforts and what they gave, and how well the players controlled their emotions during the game, and how we conducted ourselves on the pitch, I thought was of the highest level.
There was at least some other good news off the pitch this week. Obviously, Fabian Schär signing an extension to his contract. If someone had never met Fabian, how would you describe him as a player? How would you describe him as a person to that person?
I think the player and the person are actually quite similar. So what you see on the pitch, he's someone who's cool, calm, collected. He's very very confident without being arrogant. I think he believes in himself. I think he's got that confidence when he plays. But he's the same as a person. I think he's a great guy. I've built a good relationship with him. He's very highly intelligent. And I think that intelligence comes across on the pitch as well, because he makes very, very good decisions. He's technically outstanding. And he's defended very well. So, yeah, I'm really pleased with Fabi. He deserves his new deal, and hopefully it's the start of another good period for him.
Right, we'll talk about sort of the transfer lines in just a moment, but just to start on that Joe Linton injury update, because Keith said to him there, you're probably fed up of talking about injuries, and no doubt he is at this point. I mean, the fact he's ruled out for a minimum of 6 weeks, now back to 11 players unavailable, it is just another blow for Eddie Howe, isn't it? It's
a massive blow for Eddie Howe, and Newcastle in such a sticky period at the moment themselves when it comes to a form point of view. Yes, they beat Sunderland in the FA Cup, that would have given them a boost, but if you look at the Premier League form table, they're 20th. 1 win, 5 defeats, and now limited options in midfield. Tonali, Anderson, Willock, and now Joe Linton out when it comes to midfield options for Eddie Howe. And he takes on the champions this weekend, so things don't get easier for him. As he said himself, given the freedom to act, we would have done in this transfer window, but it doesn't feel like they're able to do anything at this moment in time. So much good feeling around Newcastle at the start of the season, back in the Champions League once again, but now they find themselves down in 9th in the table, taking on Man City this weekend with players coming back for them. And Eddie Howe's going to try and find 11 to put together to try and compete at the top level.
That was the key line that you just picked out there, where he said, given the freedom, we would have already brought players in already, saying that FFP is a problem. He also mentioned quotes from Darren Eales yesterday, who basically admitted that star players could leave because they are so hamstrung with FFP. I'll just bring you one of the quotes from Darren Eales yesterday, because he was asked directly whether Alexander Isak, Sven Botman or Bruno Guimaraes could be sold. And he said, on any player at any time, it depends on circumstances. It is difficult to hypothesis, but if we were offered £1 billion for one of those players, then no one could argue against that making sense. What did you make when you saw those quotes yesterday?
Yeah, I think it's indicative of where Newcastle are. And obviously, just given that blow with Joe Linton and in general with where they are with FFP, I think it is important to highlight some of the positives for Newcastle and for Newcastle fans, because Newcastle fans are probably tuning in right now thinking, more injuries, Joe Linton's out, we might lose our biggest players. But I think a lot of what he had to say was really good in terms of, their revenue for this year, £250 million. From 2022 to 2023, which is up £70 million from last year. It's a 39% increase from the year before. But with the constraints of FFP, they've got the frustrations of having the most wealthiest owners, but not being able to do it. And that's where I think Newcastle fans are quite understandably really patient with it, and where they're going in a good direction. They have to be pleased with where they've got to, but they're just at a little bit of a crossroads here. And he's highlighted some of the difficulties. Spurs' financial report from last year, 444 million, with Newcastle at 250. So that shows you how much they have to catch up. And then he went and spoke about Manchester City's 713 million pounds, and that's not including this year, where obviously look what they've won. So it's going to be even more. So that's just a little bit of a parameter of how far Newcastle have to go to be a sustainable top 6 side. But what they have got in their favour is their seller front of shirt deal that they've done, £25 million. A large amount coming in from Adidas as their new kit manufacturer. That hasn't been taken into account for this year's. And also the Champions League money, £37 million they got for qualifying and participating in those group stage games. So things are looking up for Newcastle, and it's very important that they get this bit right. So I just wanted to highlight that as a positive for Newcastle fans, that a lot is going right behind the scenes. But I think with what he said in terms of actions, player trades and the way they manipulate transfers going forward and manoeuvring around things. And, it could be that, not £1 billion, but, I think Bruno Guimaraes is probably a good example, or someone like Tonali in the future. Let's just say they bought him for £50 million, and let's say they sold him for £90 million. Then they've got an extra £40 million to play with if they get another player for £50 million and stagger those payments over 5 years at £10 million each. That goes down as an extra £40 million they've got in their back pocket to spend elsewhere. So that's the reasoning behind it. So I don't think Newcastle fans should hear that buzz, that line and think, oh my gosh, we're going to sell all our players because it hasn't worked out. That's not what he's saying. He's saying we've got to be really tactically astute with how we manage the situation, and it does bring about frustrations. But he did also say that the owners are committed to spending the maximum they can spend within the restrictions they have, which is a positive sign to hear.
I mean, we're obviously focusing on the January transfer window, but with all this kind of in mind, do you feel like it's going to be a busy summer at Newcastle?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a brilliant breakdown from Flex. I think the thing is they're the richest club in the world, but the frustration for the owners is they can't spend the money. But Darren Eales is saying there, we're compliant with FFP. We're going to continue to be compliant with FFP as well. It did hint that summer would be a better window to trade in, but they still will have those restrictions. I think what you were saying there, Flex, is that Newcastle continue to grow commercially, bring in more revenue, qualifying for competitions like the Champions League. That gives them a bit more headroom when it comes to financial fair play and be able to sign players. But that's the difficulty, isn't it, for a club that wants to be upwardly mobile? That's what Darren Eales said yesterday. The restrictions do make it very difficult for a club like Newcastle to just spend, because they need to try and fit within financial fair play. Eventually, they'll get into a situation, hopefully, where the academy is strong enough where they can look at potentially selling academy graduates for profit, pure profit when it comes to financial fair play, something that Chelsea have done so well over the last 3 transfer windows, which meant they've been able to sign the players they've wanted to. But it's a frustrating time to be Newcastle fans. But one thing they're also keen to point out as well, 11 players unavailable at the moment. That squad looks completely different when all those players are fit, and maybe they wouldn't need as many additions as it feels like they need now.
It feels like they need a lot right now.
With one game a week as well, because they're out of, well, I know they're in through to the FA Cup, but with that ease on the fixture congestion that Eddie Howe was talking about, literally looking at his players in analysis saying, we're playing absolutely knackered here, we're playing tired. And, you know, even on a personal, I remember them coming to Old Trafford with resting all the players and not Man United out the Carabao Cup 3-0. They've still managed to, you know, beat Arsenal at home. Yeah, I know, tough times. But it's actually, but I'm using that as, you know, to say well done to Newcastle, because even though all of this has happened, they've still managed to compete and, you know, beat Chelsea at home, beat Arsenal at home with this really fatigued squad and all these injuries. So now that the schedule has eased, and he said that's a good point that was brought up by the reporter, that should help them in some capacity.
Yeah. Eddie Howe very much sort of talking about FFP being a problem. Maybe with all this in mind, is that why the Calvin Phillips sort of link has disappeared a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the boys have spoke so well about Newcastle's situation. I think it probably says it all about their situation, that this is probably the most logical, sensible transfer move that there is out there at the moment. Calvin Phillips going on loan to Newcastle because there's a gap because of injuries in Tonali, and the player wants to move on from Manchester City, and Manchester City are willing to loan him out. But Newcastle simply cannot make that happen because even the funds for the loan leave them too tight with financial fair play. And I genuinely think that says it all about how tight they must be. So you've said about the positives for Newcastle fans. I think that is a little bit of a worry as well.
Yeah, worth saying as well, we didn't hear it there, but Eddie Howe, a little bit later on in that news conference, did go on to say that Newcastle haven't inquired about Dominic Solanke at Bournemouth, and then went back to saying that FFP is a problem for them. Right, next up, Kylian Mbappe, Luka Modric, Rafa Varane, all available in the summer for nothing. We're going to discuss their futures next.
Get a bit of Luka at Villa.
Olivier Giroud, one of my all-time favourites. Absolutely love watching him play. He's such a unique striker. The way he links the play, and he's still doing it for Milan as well. Milan are in the position where they're most probably going to be in the Champions League next season, but we'll probably wait until the end of the season to discuss a contract with Olivier Giroud. But me and Flex were talking earlier, and do you think he still improves a lot of top Premier League teams? I think arguably would still improve his old team, Arsenal. Yeah. Arguably would get in Chelsea's old team as well.
I'd have him at United.
You'd have him at Manchester United. He's just an incredible
Back up to Ollie Watkins?
Yeah, we'll take him on a bench with Modric Flex at Villa Park. Don't worry.
That would work, yeah.
Honestly, but Olivier Giroud, 37 years old, but has never relied on pace, and you could see him playing into his 40s, really. He's in magnificent condition, as we all know. So, yeah, Olivier Giroud, that'll be one to keep an eye on.
That Emery pool, yeah, we're going to have Giroud there, we're going to have Modric there. Lastly, Rafa Varane. How does this end?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think, personally, Manchester United right to not trigger his extension under his current terms, and the latest reports and information that we got from Manchester United was that they're trying to renegotiate on reduced terms, which would look a lot different. But Rafael Varane, again, at this stage of his career, might say, I'm not taking a 200 grand sort of pay cut, might look to the Saudi League, might look to go back to France, might look to go abroad, and again, a highly decorated player, one of the top centre-backs in his prime of this generation, a fantastic player, fantastic servant to Real Madrid. And even at Manchester United, when he has played, he's looked absolutely fine, and you can see the class that's in him. Obviously, injuries have played a part. Yeah, he's obviously retired from international football as a world champion with France as well. So, yeah, a big move for him and a big decisive move for him, but a highly decorated player.
Disappointed to not sort of see him do more at United?
Like a lot of players at United, yes, I would say yes. But when he has played, he is like a little personal favourite of mine. A lot of people who know me, my Manchester United fandom, I do love Rafael Varane. So, yeah, it's going to be a sad scene.
He's getting on the stops and chats you in the mix zone.
Yeah,
probably what I imagine.
Probably.
Right, we'll talk more about that on Transfer Talk Total Football. Coming up next, though, we're going to hear more from Eddie Howe and build up to the weekend's games in the Premier League as well. That's next.
Don't leave.
Want to buy your next car your way? At Car Store you can Welcome to Car